What is up, Canada? What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here. And in today's video, we're going to be building upon a story that we've actually talked about in the past, and that's the travel ban that's, formalizing here in Canada. We don't really officially have a travel ban, but we're also getting closer to an official travel ban. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing, do you believe that further travel restrictions will actually help smooth the COVID-19 numbers and bring them down? And would you be willing to spend an extra $2,000 for a PCR testing and hotel quarantine, through the government essentially setup? They've essentially set up a whole new thing. We'll get into that in a second. And then finally, could Canada eventually impose a complete travel ban? And what would your thoughts be on that? Do you think anything's necessary in order to stop COVID-19? Or do you think it's time to stop the COVID-19 measures? I'd love for this to be a two-way conversation. So I'd love for you guys to jump in the comment section, share your perspective, share your opinions, and we'd love it when you share your facts with links to your original sources. But let us know, where do you land when it comes to travel bans here in Canada specifically? But I'd even love to hear your thoughts in general around the world. And so what brought this to your YouTube channel, to my YouTube channel today, essentially is that the government of Canada has rolled out some additional measures that you need to be aware of if you're currently traveling or you're currently thinking of traveling. So as COVID-19 variants continue to reveal themselves, the government of Canada has decided to heighten its international travel restrictions. So these are restrictions, not a complete ban. And so during this media availability on Friday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau introduced a number of new measures aimed at limiting travel and implementing more thorough testing and quarantining practices. And so as always, we've got links to everything we're discussing in the video description down below. If you guys want to go and learn more, we really encourage you to go to those original sources and learn more. But here's the gist of it. So from now through April 30th, Canada's main airlines, that's Air Canada, WestJet, Air Transat, and Sunwing, have agreed to suspend all services to sun destinations, i.e. the Caribbean and Mexico, but not other destinations. And the idea here is to stop frivolous traveling, I suppose. And so these airlines will make return flight arrangements with customers who are currently visiting such regions and need to get home. And said Trudeau, with the challenges we currently face with COVID-19, both here and at home and abroad, we all agree that now is just not the time to be flying. By putting in place these tough measures, now we can look forward to a better time when we can all plan those vacations. It's interesting because, again, we're not really stopping vacations. We're just making it more expensive. So, my general read on this, and we'll get into my opinion in a second, is really, as long as you're rich enough, you're allowed to still travel. But if you're not quite rich enough, you should probably know your place there, little buddy. So anyways, you might recall that as of January 7th, the federal government required anyone boarding a flight to Canada had to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken within 72 hours of departure time. Now tougher rules are being implemented. So beginning this week, that's today, all international flights will be required to land in one of four major airports: Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, and Vancouver. And again, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's interesting. Could we only roll out these stricter requirements at these airports, or is this simply just big government being big government? And then any traveler entering or re-entering Canada from an international destination will be subject to a mandatory PCR test. So Trudeau explained this test could take upwards of 3 days to deliver a result. And during that time, the traveler must stay at Health Canada approved hotel. So the cost for the test and hotel stay will be upwards of $2,000 per person and must be paid up front. Now, I can't help myself. I need to put in a little aside here. I can't wait until 3, 4, 5 years from now when all the exposés come out about all the profiteering that occurred around these crazy new programs, because I can just guarantee you some hotel owners are going to make out like bandits while others are getting curb stomped because of the restrictions. So it's fun when the government gets to pick winners in an industry, right? So moving beyond this then, so venues are being compensated for extra safety measures that they'll need to put in place. So obviously just the ones the government picks, but those ones will be implementing additional safety measures. So if a traveler receives a negative result on their COVID-19 test, they will be able to go home and begin the mandatory 14-day quarantine. And Trudeau said these home quarantines will feature significantly increased surveillance and enforcement. And specifically, it sounds like you will be swabbed on day 10 to confirm your COVID status. And if a traveler tests positive for that COVID-19, this individual will be moved from a hotel to a designated government facility. Now, they didn't really elaborate based upon this government designated facility. And I am a little curious why you can't just go home and quarantine yourself, and exactly what the rules and restrictions are going to be around this government facility and whether it's absolutely mandatory that you go there. But I imagine that there's definitely going to be people that don't like that decision. If you're one of them, let me know in the comments. What's your thoughts? What's your opinions? If you think that this is a perfectly reasonable measure, I'd also love to hear your perspective on that side. So Trudeau also acknowledged that international travel only accounts for 2% of COVID cases in Canada. But the Prime Minister reiterated during this press conference that even one new case, especially if it's due to a variant, can result in many more COVID-19 diagnoses. So the one thing that stands out to me here is I'm actually less concerned about this travel restrictions in the moment and more concerned about the bigger question of these new variants. It seems like we're really being positioned to expect these variants to constantly be a source of confusion and chaos in our world. And I imagine that even if we get one strain under control, that we're always going to have a loose strain out there, and we're always going to be forced to implement at least some of the measures that we have today. So again, love to hear your thoughts. Maybe this is just tinfoil hat math at its best. Let me know in the comments section. And then on Sunday, Transport Minister Omar told the CBC that these testing and quarantine measures could go into effect soon. And so this was specific to even over land borders. So we've also seen that they're going to be rolling out potentially more restrictions on land border crossings as well for truck drivers and things of that nature. So specifically, the quote here is, I would ask people to be prepared as soon as February 4th. I can't tell you if that's exactly when it's going to start, but I would ask people to be ready for it as soon as possible. So if you're currently traveling abroad, you probably want to get home if you want to get in before those measures. And it's really interesting how these measures don't have to be implemented immediately, but we can give a little grace period in case anyone wants to rush home and not have to deal with those issues. Again, we'll get to my opinions in a second, but please share yours in the comments. So then building upon that, and the land borders, Trudeau also added, we will also in the coming weeks be requiring non-essential travelers to show a negative test before entry at land border with the US, and we are working to set up additional testing requirements for land travel. So according to Canada Border Service Agency data obtained by Global News, more than 6.3 million travelers have entered Canada since the beginning of the pandemic and did not have to participate in a mandatory quarantine period. Seems kind of crazy that 6.3 million people didn't have to, even while we knew we were in a pandemic. Out of the 8.6 million total travelers who entered Canada by land, so essentially we can see about 1/4 of travelers so far have been forced to quarantine. The rest were allowed to just kind of run hog wild. 74% of those were truck drivers and essential workers responsible for transporting goods between Canada and America. And topic number 3, is it illegal for Canadians to travel now? So this comes from Global News, and specifically, I think this is important for us to understand. So according to Section 6 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, every citizen of Canada has the right to enter, remain in, and leave Canada. So on January 7th, University of Ottawa law professor Martha Jackman told Global News that for Canadians, we have a charter right to enter and leave Canada and also to move around from province to province to live and work. That's important as well because we've already heard rumors of them wanting to restrict travel between provinces. She continued, any restrictions that are imposed on the mobility is subject to a charter review and would have to be justified as a reasonable limit on Canadian charter rights. It doesn't sound exactly ironclad there, but I guess I'll take what we got. So topic number 4 that we want to talk about today is how will this impact the airlines? Because obviously international travel is a big part of the airlines. So essentially from now until April 30th, they're not going to those sun destinations. And that's a big part of the Canadian flight economy, right? Of our entire airline industry. So of course, this is probably going to mean more layoffs. And we're already seeing the federal government being asked by the unions, such as Uniform National President Jerry Dias, who essentially asked, said, you can't have one without the other. Further travel restrictions without providing financial support for airline workers is a risk to the very future of Canada's airline industry. And he went on to say, understand these travel restrictions are needed to help flatten the curve, but added they also highlight the continued withering away of airline jobs. More than 300,000 workers are frustrated, wondering why their federal government refuses to present a plan to help them weather this pandemic. Totally get your position there, Jerry, as the uniform president, but I mean, that just sounds like every small business owner I know. So I'm not sure if we can really pull out too big of a violin for the airline industry. I think it's just like any industry right now that's getting boot stomped by the government. Unlike other countries, Canada's continued refusal to help the industry is making a bad situation worse. And so on Friday, Trudeau spoke about the importance of Canada's continuing to have a successful airline industry. And however, he didn't offer specifics regarding how the government may assist the likes of Air Canada, WestJet, Air Transit, and Sunwing at this moment. So I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts? What are your interpretations on these new restrictions, on these new measures for Canadians? Now, the one thing I can't help but think towards, and I was mentioning to this to my team on our Monday morning call earlier today, is when I was younger, right? I grew up in a family, I would say we're kind of in the middle of the road from income, right? We weren't dirt poor, but we definitely weren't wealthy either. We were in that sort of middle class or lower middle class that if you saved your money, you could save and drive down to Disney World for a winter vacation, maybe once or twice in your lifetime. And so essentially that's what we did growing up as kids. I can remember going to Disney World or Florida with my parents. I think we went 3 times growing up. And now I can't help but think that my parents back then wouldn't be able to afford to go to Disney World now. However, for myself personally, I could still go to Disney World today because I'm kind of rich compared to the average Canadian. So I'm fine. I can easily afford this extra $2,000. In fact, a lot of my peers that I know that have already flew the coop in Canada and flown to the Caribbean or Mexico or anywhere else, most of them sound like they don't really care. Most of them sound like they're just going to wait until April 30th is over and then come back to Canada. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm not even sure what my thoughts are, but the one thing that is unfortunate is, to me, if this is as serious as they're saying, this should almost be like gun in your face. You're not allowed to travel, and let's whip this shit into shape. And if it's not the end of the world, then we should probably dial back our messaging and our end of the world narrative. Right now, there seems to be this disconnect. It's the end of the world as we know it, but we'll wait until February 4th to roll out these restrictions. It's the end of the world as we know it, so you can't travel to sunny destinations, even though sunny destinations would be safer than winter destinations, because it seemed like COVID kind of disappeared this summer for Canada because the sun was out. But now going to a sunny destination is still considered too high of a risk. Again, I know this is an oversimplification. I know that throughout Florida has just been posting crazy COVID numbers because they're just partying away, or at least they were last year. And I mean, a zebra is not going to change its stripes that fast. But I think there is a bigger discussion to be had here. And I think the bigger discussion is, what happens if these new strains of COVID never go away? Are we always going to live in fear? Are we always going to have travel restrictions? Are you always going to be scared of your neighbor? Because understand, this is essentially, breaking apart family units. You don't see your friends and family that often. To be honest, guys, don't tell anyone. But I actually went for a drive yesterday, and I drove to the variety store. It was the first time I'd left the house in probably 21 days. I hope I don't go to jail for it, but I did wear a mask when I went into Max Milk to buy a Cliff Bar. So we'll see how that all plays out. But it is wild to think that a year ago, I would have just nonchalantly went to that Max Milk without a second thought late on a Sunday night. Whereas in yesterday, there's a second thought involved there. And I'd love to hear, what are your second thoughts about these rules and implementations and restrictions and bans? And do you think that I'm completely off the basis here? If you think that, hey, you're not taking it seriously enough, Matt, please share some of your data and resources. One of the things that we're currently working on as a story is, what is the actual usage capacity that's currently going on in our ICUs? Because we've made over 3,000 bids available during COVID, 3,000 additional bids in Ontario ICUs. And from what I'm seeing projected, the projections don't look like we're using all those 3,000 bids. So again, I know that this is a complicated story, and it's difficult to model these things, but I really would love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and your sources in that comment section. And as always, this is a two-way conversation, so I'm going to jump in here and check out some of your comments. But I appreciate all of those of you that have been commenting. If you're enjoying this video, if you're enjoying this series of videos, what I need you guys to do is smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to my channel, and make sure you hit that notification bell, because YouTube's not doing us any favors when it comes to letting you guys know what's up. So I see Sean just said, I just got back on Saturday. They had more security coming in than I've ever had getting on a plane. It was insane. This ban is just fascism, is what Sean adds. We've also got Ian Jack is always in the comments. Hey, what's up, Ian? We've got Trell. We've got Red Rock Maintenance, A1 Games. Appreciate Kim. Aberrant Arts, the usual around here as well. Appreciate all you guys sharing your perspectives. Appreciate you guys sharing some other sources or some other things to Google as well. I think it is important that we stay informed. Now, at the same time, I also know that there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, and there is a balance to walk here. So understand, regardless of which side of the argument you think you're on, if you feel your emotions just getting jacked 100, I usually use that as a moment to take a beat, take a breath, and think things through. Because often if I find myself getting too emotionally angry at a situation, I start to get blinded to facts and start focusing really just on my feelings. And that's never a good idea, whether it's for me, you guys, or our government. So again, really appreciate those of you that are sharing your perspective, sharing your sources, and sharing some of your concerns when it comes to what's going on here in Canada in regards to our COVID-19 restrictions and limitations. So again, really appreciate you guys. And we're going to have another video coming out soon. And actually, today's going to be a special day. We're doing 4 live videos. 3 are going to be at lunch. This is number 1. We've got number 2 coming out, which is the flight from cities. And you're going to want to stay around for story number 3, which is Robinhood, Elon Musk, and Clubhouse. You can't miss that. We'll see you guys shortly and appreciate you guys.